Good afternoon. This is Business Live with me, Paul Kelso. Now, data centres are fundamental to the digital economy. They're warehouses that host huge computing power. It's estimated we engage with them 750 times a day without knowing it. Now, the government has declared them critical national infrastructure, giving them the same protection as power stations and airports. Earlier, I spoke to Peter Kyle, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, and asked him how the government would deal with local communities' concerns about the increasing numbers of data centres being built around the country.
Don't think that local communities speak with one voice about things like data centres, because simultaneously people are concerned about the physical development of communities, and we need to make sure that we are respectful, that we do it in ways that are right culturally for different communities around the United Kingdom. But simultaneously, people want fast broadband. They want fast access to data. They want data to be used smartly and safely in their interests to deliver services, products, but also economic benefits for them. The jobs that come from them, the data centres, are great jobs, and they are long-term secure jobs into the future. All of these things are going to be part of the mix and the conversation that we have to have as central government, local government and regional governments with communities as we go forward. But if we lag behind, if we don't seize these opportunities, then we will miss out on a global opportunity to get investment into our country, not just to create a few great jobs, but to transform our economy going forward, to harness the sector that has the largest growth potential for it. What I'm doing is not just seeing where people apply for planning application up and down the country. I am seeing and assessing where the potential for our country is if we get everything right and seize all of the digital opportunities that are out there for a country like Britain. And that is what I'm trying to do, but to do so safely, to take communities with us and make sure that every person and every region of our country benefits equally from it, and not just one at the expense of the others, which is what too many governments of the past have done.
You've also, as a science minister, I'm sure, got one eye on space, particularly today. We have this attempted private commercial spacewalk for the first time. Britain's got a big space industry. Perhaps people don't realise quite how big the industry is. But in terms of these kind of projects, are we going to have to wait for our own billionaire class to decide they want to cross final frontiers, or could government-funded space missions happen in the medium term?
I mean, it's a really interesting development when you see private investment and capital and private wealth of the scale that we see with examples of Elon Musk and SpaceX getting involved in space exploration. So the role of a country and a government the size of Britain is not to say that we can do all this alone, because actually, largely, if we did do so, it would be a waste of money, because it would be replicating work that is being done elsewhere. We have to see ourselves as a partner, and we are a partner to the incredible private space sector that we have. I was in Glasgow just a couple of weeks ago and saw two satellite companies who are manufacturing small satellites that are fueling the satellite boom that we have for that particular sector, the small sector. Surrey Satellites is one of the world leaders, and Elon Musk has been involved in that company in the past. So my job is to make sure that the regulatory system, the support system is there, so we have the research and development funding to partner with these companies so we can keep our competitive edge. We also have one opportunity with vertical takeoff in Saxford in the Shetland Islands. This is something which is a private company which government has already I've put £10 million into, and I'm keeping that investment there so that we can see whether we could be the only country on mainland continent of Europe that could perhaps get vertical takeoff. So we have potential. There are areas within that potential where government can play an active role in getting the innovation there off the ground and into space. We're also a partner to the European Space Agency, which we are full members of and we are active partners of. But these are the partnerships that will deliver. The economy there in space is a very fast-growing one. Britain has great innovation, research potential. I want to make sure that this is a government that is strategic, it is careful with public money, it uses it in ways that delivers real global opportunities for Britain in very specific and targeted ways, and we find our way in the market for space that works for everyone.
Now, a bid for the Daily Telegraph, led by the owner of the New York Sun, has raised the possibility of a return by its former proprietor, Conrad Black. Lord Black was a high-profile figure in the newspaper industry before his conviction in 2007 for fraud and obstruction of justice, which led to him spending 3.5 years in prison. Sky's city editor Mark Kleiman has this story and joins me now. Mark, the sale or attempted sale of the Telegraph has been quite the saga already, but I didn't have the return of Conrad Black as a plot twist.
No, me neither until today, Paul, because last night we revealed on Sky News that the owner of the New York Sun, a man called David was in serious discussions about mounting a bid for the Daily Telegraph and its Sunday sister title. Now, he joins Sir Paul Marshall, who earlier this week bought The Spectator magazine for £100 million, and National World, the London-listed company headed by the newspaper veteran David Montgomery, in the bidding for the Telegraph titles. And the link with Conrad Black, or Lord Black as he is still known, despite no longer being a member of the House of Lords, the link is that Lord Black was a founder-director and is a contributing editor to the New York Sun, which is a digital-only title. It was revived a couple of years ago. And friends and former colleagues of Lord Black tell me that he would still dearly love to be involved in the Telegraph in some way. So it seems unthinkable that if his close colleague, Mr. Effune, is bidding for the Telegraph, that he won't be being consulted on that proposal. I mean, he knew the Telegraph inside out. He owned it for the best part of 20 years through his company, Hollinger International. We still have some way to go before we know who's going to be triumphant in this auction, Paul. Final bids for the Telegraph are due on the 27th of September. There should be at least 3 offers in the mix, with, again, the possibility of another. An email from Anna Jones, the Telegraph's chief executive, to staff earlier today, which I've seen, also raised the prospect that there is yet another publicly unidentified bidder in the process still. So more twists and turns to come. But as you say, the potential re-emergence of Lord Conrad Black in the context of the Daily Telegraph was an extraordinary twist that very few people saw coming.
Mark Kleiman, thank you very much. You'll keep us posted, I know. Now, the UK national debt is on course to triple over the next 50 years. The Office for Budget Responsibility has that stark warning in its Fiscal Risks and Sustainability report. The report says the impact of an ageing population, climate change and geopolitical tensions will push up public spending to an unsustainable level. The fiscal watchdog says that governments will have to act to prevent this debt spiral coming to pass. Joining me now is Professor David Miles, who's a member of the OBR's Budget Responsibility Committee. This document, you publish it annually, David. It always makes pretty stark warning. It takes a very long view of the public finances. Just sum up for us the essence of what you're warning today.
Well, it seems a sort of rather apocalyptic message, but really what it says is that if the government doesn't do anything to try and control government spending relative to the tax revenue, just leaves the tax system where it is, so it continues to generate about 40% of GDP in tax revenue, whilst the demands on the public sector rise, and if public sector spending rises in line to match those demands, particularly in the area of state pensions and health services, then there's going to be an ever-widening gap between what government spends, what it takes in tax revenue. That will cause the amount of debt to just keep rising relative to GDP. The interest on that debt will then get bigger and bigger, and you'll be on an unsustainable path. Now, that's not a forecast. It doesn't say that's inevitable, that's what's going to happen. It just says that's what would happen unless you took some action. Probably that was what would happen, unless you took some action to head it off.
Elsewhere today, we've been talking a lot about the state of the National Health Service and its current plight, but the cost of maintaining the health service and caring for an elderly population is a core strand in this report. Perhaps you could just set out for viewers quite how the impact of that ageing population, and particularly the increase in relation to the number of working age adults, will push up the costs and the demands on the public purse.
Well, it's very likely in the UK, given the ageing of the population, the proportion of the population that is 70, 80 years and older will rise pretty steadily. And as you can appreciate, those are the people that make the heaviest use of the health services, particularly in the last sort of 5-10 years of people's lives. At the same time, that ageing of the population slightly reduces the labour force relative to the overall population. So you get a double effect of that. It's a bit of a downward pressure on tax revenue, but more stronger than that is the upward pressure on the health service. And we estimate, roughly speaking, that if the government increased health spending in line with that demand, didn't do anything to try and offset it, maybe health spending relative to GDP, which is already high, about almost 8%, might rise to a number closer to 15%. So that's a very big increase in demands upon the government.
Which raises the obvious question where the money will come from. Hitherto, since the Second World War, as I understand it, the increase in healthcare spending has been funded by reduction in defence spending and not spending as much on debt interest. You've already said that's back. What are the options if you're trying to address the public finances over the long term to try and prevent this debt spiral?
Well, the most benign outcome would be that the growth of the UK economy, the rise in productivity over time, picks up from where it's been over the last 15 years, which has been pretty dismal, and looks more like it did in the 50-odd years between, say, 1960 and about 2010. Over that period, that 50-year period, output per person, productivity, real incomes, grew by something like almost 2.5% a year. The last 15 years, it's been more like 0.5%. Now, if we were to return to that faster growth over a sustained period, then quite likely the stock of debt relative to GDP wouldn't rise close to 300%. It might level off and even decline from where it is today. So that's the most benign outcome, and there may be things government can do to try and boost productivity growth. In the absence of that, really there isn't much alternative, that you have to close the gap between tax revenue and spending by putting pressure on both, in a way. You try and get more tax out of GDP, and you try and bear down on government spending so it doesn't rise in line with demand, and the government has to make some difficult decisions.
You're speaking from the OBR. You adjudicate, think of you as the fiscal referee. You're preparing, I know, forecasts now for the budget. A great deal of talk in the last week or two around the £22 billion black hole, as it's been dubbed by the Chancellor. Is it fair to call it a black hole, in your view, in the view of the OBR? We're in the process of undertaking a review to assess that and see what might have gone wrong in projections of so-called departmental expenditure, or DEL, government spending on departments and providing services. We're going to report on that before the budget, maybe around the time of the budget, and I think we'll be able to say something a bit clearer on what may have happened there, and more importantly, how to stop difficulties in predicting near-term government spending in the future. So we'll be back on that once we've completed our report. Well, we look forward to that, and I'm sure much of Westminster does too. David Miles, thank you very much for your time. And on that subject, a former chief economist at the Bank of England has told Sky News that the Chancellor's warning of a black hole in the public finances in the summer was unnecessary and unhelpful. Andy Haldane was speaking to Sophie Ridge for the Politics Hub.
It'd be much better to say nothing until you provide solutions to filling the black hole as well as revealing it. As it was, that's generated fear and foreboding, an uncertainty among consumers, among businesses, among investors in UK PLC, which is unfortunate because just after the election there was a sense of refresh, a sense of renewal, a confidence about the UK, both domestically and internationally.
And you can watch Sophie's full interview with Andy Haldane on the Politics Hub tonight at 7 p.m. here on Sky News. Some other stories now. Losses have narrowed at the John Lewis Partnership. It reported a pre-tax loss of £30 million for the first half of the year, down 49% on a year earlier. The John Lewis department store saw sales fall 3% to £2 billion, but Waitrose saw sales rise by 5%. Chief Executive Nish Kankiwala said he expected profits to grow significantly for the full year, and that today's results showed that the company's transformation plan is working. Microsoft has laid off 650 staff from its Xbox gaming division. It brings the total of staff who've lost their jobs to 2,550 at the company in the last year. Xbox chief executive Phil Spencer confirmed that no new games have been cancelled or studios closed due to the move. And Ryanair chief executive Michael O'Leary has told Sky News that he's prepared to introduce a 2-drink limit on board his aircraft if the same rule can be applied to bars in airports. Last month he called for alcohol limits at airports following an increase in violent disorder among passengers over the summer.
If the price of putting a drink limit on the airport, which is where the problem is created, is putting a drink limit on board the aircraft, we have no problem with that. Happy to do it tomorrow. The real issue here is how do we stop these people engaging, getting drunk at airports, particularly when this summer, we've had a huge spike up in air traffic control delays. They're getting on board with too much alcohol in their system. Fine, if we identify them as being drunk on board, we won't serve them alcohol, but that doesn't solve the problem.
Still to come on Business Live. The European Central Bank cuts interest rates again as the Eurozone's inflation continues to fall.